Let's talk about one of the biggest challenges of our time. How are we supposed to make sense of the future when we're absolutely drowning in information?
I mean, get this. Every single day, we generate 2.5 quintillion bytes of data. That is more information than we have ever had access to in all of human history. And get this, over 90% of it was created in just the last couple of years. But that leads to a huge paradox, doesn't it? If we have so much data at our fingertips, why do our predictions, from the stock market to elections, so often get it completely wrong? It seems like more information hasn't automatically made us any wiser. And you know, this isn't some new 21st century problem. History shows us that these information explosions can be incredibly disorienting. When the printing press came along, it didn't immediately lead to progress. No, it first led to mass confusion and centuries of conflict before it sparked the Enlightenment. It just takes time to learn how to separate the real signal from all the noise. To really wrap our heads around this paradox, let's dive into one of the biggest prediction failures in modern history, the 2008 financial crisis. Right at the very heart of the crisis, you had the credit rating agencies. I mean, their entire job, the whole reason they exist, is to predict the risk of investments. And they gave their highest possible stamp of approval, AAA, to thousands of these super complex financial products that were all built on mortgages.
And they were incredibly precise about it. Standard & Poor's said the chance of one of these AAA-rated securities defaulting in 5 years was just 0.12%. That's about one chance in 850. They were basically screaming from the rooftops, these things are as safe as it gets.
And here, wow, here you can see the catastrophic gap between that prediction and what actually happened. The real failure rate wasn't 1 in 850, it was 28%. I mean, the models weren't just a little bit wrong, they were off by a factor of more than 200. That's not even in the same universe.
So when they were hauled in to explain themselves, what was the big defense? Well, it was basically a collective shrug. The head of S&P claimed it was this completely unpredictable event, a total shock that just nobody saw coming.
But that just wasn't true. Not even close. The warnings were everywhere. You had prominent economists, major magazines, even Nobel Prize winners talking about the biggest bubble in history for years. Heck, you can even see it in the Google search trends from back then. The signal was loud and clear for anyone who was willing to listen. So how could these super sophisticated models, with all their supposed precision, get it so spectacularly wrong? Well, it all comes down to a really fundamental, really crucial distinction in how we think about the future.
Okay, so on one hand, you've got risk. Think about a poker game or a roll of the dice. The rules are clear, the odds can be calculated. It's something you can actually measure and put a price on.
But then, on the other hand, you've got uncertainty. And this is the scary stuff. This is risk that is fundamentally impossible to measure. You might know there are dangers out there, but you have no real clue how big they are or when they might show up. Your guess could be off by a factor of 1,000. And that was the fatal flaw. The financial crisis was a problem of deep, deep uncertainty. But the rating agencies and the banks, they performed a kind of magic trick. They took all that unknowable uncertainty and spun it into something that looked and felt like simple, measurable risk. They created a complete illusion of confidence.
Their models were built entirely on data from the past, a past where a nationwide housing crash had never, ever happened before. It's what's known as an out-of-sample problem. It's kind of like a driver who brags about their perfect driving record, but fails to mention they've never once tried to drive drunk. Their past data gave them absolutely no way to predict the crash that was coming.
But look, this wasn't just a failure of some computer models. This was a very, very human failure. It's about how our own biases, our own psychology gets in the way of seeing the world as it really is. As Shakespeare warned us centuries ago, we have this powerful tendency to interpret things to fit the story we already want to believe. We see the patterns we expect to see, and we usually make sure they have a nice, happy ending.
And this brings us to two types of thinkers, an idea from political scientist Philip Tetlock. On one side, you have the hedgehogs. They're the people who know one big thing. They have a grand theory that explains everything. They're super confident, which makes them sound really convincing, but it also makes them stubborn and likely to ignore any evidence that contradicts their worldview. And on the other side, you've got the foxes. They know lots of little things. They're okay with complexity and nuance. They're cautious, and they're adaptable.
So over a massive 20 years study, Tetlock discovered something groundbreaking. Foxes are consistently and significantly better at forecasting the future. And it's not because they're smarter, it's because they have intellectual humility. They're comfortable being wrong, and they're comfortable admitting what they don't know. And that is the polar opposite of the hedgehog's stubborn overconfidence.
And this isn't just some interesting academic theory. It actually gives us a practical playbook for how we can all improve our own judgment by learning to think a little more like a fox.
The solution isn't some secret mathematical formula. It's an attitudinal change. It's about shifting our entire mindset away from that hedgehog's search for absolute certainty and moving toward the fox's comfort with complexity.
So this lays out 3 core principles. First, think in probabilities, not in certainties. Acknowledge that most things aren't a simple yes or no. Second, always be updating. A forecast is a living hypothesis, not something carved in stone. As the famous saying goes, when the facts change, I change my mind. And third, look for consensus. Seriously, combining a bunch of different perspectives is one of the best ways to cancel out our own individual biases and get closer to the truth. At the end of the day, we have a prediction problem. The world is getting noisier every single day. But if the signal is the truth and the noise is everything that distracts us from it, we can get better at telling them apart. So the question is, what are you doing to find it?